Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Our first graphic for today's show is the Hazardous Weather graphic, and that's got the Alaska Range, Eastern Alaska Range here illuminated with the advisory color, and that's for a wind advisory, and that's for tomorrow, Sunday, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Sunday. Looking for 25 to 35 mile per hour winds with gusts of 55 miles an hour during the day. And that's actually in a smaller area than this shows. It's Fort Greely south, and that again through Sunday. Otherwise, fire danger, still an area here over the upper Yukon Valley of just barely getting into the high category there. And then the one back here to the, or along the Noatak Valley, Kimberley, that's gone with the rainfall they've received. But this one showed up again, dry conditions, a little bit of an easterly breeze there, kind of nudged it back up toward that high fire danger zone there on the western Arctic coast and a ways inland over the western North Slope. And looking at the satellite imagery today, see clouds moving out of the state here, followed by drier conditions into the interior. Lots of moisture streaming northeastward, bringing rainfall with a warm front here and the frontal boundary into Bristol Bay, spreading rain to Kodiak Island up to the Kenai Peninsula, into the western Gulf of Alaska, far western Gulf, with clouds in across the Panhandle and cloudy skies of precipitation today, with batch right off the coast, moving onto the central and south coast this afternoon, and another zone of clouds out over the eastern Bering Sea, sort of call it a bent back occlusion at the front. Low pressure here southwest of the Pribilofs or northeast of Adak with the next system, and higher pressure out beyond that. Along the Arctic coast, upper level low, both the surface and aloft, weak at the surface. Maybe a few rain or snow showers, flurries, real light precipitation if any occurred with some areas of fog along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. That's about it up there with, you can see some dry conditions over the central North Slope areas down into the interior across the Brooks Range. On the chart today, here's the weakened and more showery trough, just scattered showers, mostly cloudy skies here from the eastern interior, 40-mile country, upper Tanana Valley through the central interior. A little more scattered of the shower activity here toward the weakening low center out toward the Seward Peninsula. But rainfall amounts not too spectacular with that at all. And you can see the drier conditions both north of the trough and here across southern Alaska, with some areas seeing some sun breaks, but a lot of moisture, mid and high level clouds spreading in over Cook Inlet, with rainfall near or just south of Kenai, down across Kachemak Bay, and of course into Kamishak Bay. So far, Seldovia's picked up about roughly 2/10 of an inch of precipitation. Kodiak's had 1/4 of an inch there, and heavier amounts back to the west. Cape Newenham's had 87/100ths of an inch, and a lot more will be on the way with this front, and it'll be pushing slowly northward and northeastward here tonight and into tomorrow. Slow movement due to the strong upper level ridge. It's kind of building northward over the Gulf of Alaska into the eastern interior areas. Off the southeast coast, rain showing up with this system tonight. That will drop off to the southeast and weaken, and showers will probably linger over the southern panhandle until early tomorrow morning. Drying conditions back to the north with clearing. High pressure here developing there northeast of Yakutat, and that'll keep most of the interior dry. And then this southwest flow pushing this front and moisture. Look for moderate amounts of rain tonight. Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, even Kodiak there with a warm front, slowly pushing into Prince William Sound and northward here, mostly western Cook Inlet up into the western Susitna Valley. May see some rain, though, probably showing up in the Mananuska Valley as well, and probably all of Cook Inlet toward morning, and that'll extend back across Norton Sound, northern Yukon Delta, and the Seward Peninsula. With trough swinging around, that'll bring an increase in the winds. Not strong winds with this system, but the winds will increase along with the showers and rain into the Perbilofts there. And then a much weaker system back here to the northwest with high pressure south of the western Aleutians. Outlook for tomorrow, that front pushes eastward, about the same forecast we're seeing yesterday here with the frontal boundary lying east-west through the central interior, some moderate amounts of rain with that, and then the wind advisories, winds kicking up there for the eastern Alaska Range, Fort Greely south for those gusts 55 miles an hour. Another trough enhances the rain, a little more numerous on the showers and rainfall, and a little windier conditions as that rolls through the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Just showers for Bristol Bay, but look for some clearing to take place. Sunshine increasing, southern Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula looking good, dry, all of the Aleutians, maybe some breaks. You'll be in between systems there for the Perbilofts. And the one back to the west, quite weak. Otherwise, just maybe a little breezy on the Arctic coast with some areas of fog. And dry day tomorrow for the Panhandle, depending on how fast this precipitation pushes its way into the northern Panhandle. That's kind of, timing's a little bit of a problem with that, but definitely on Monday with this warm front, you'll see some rain over the northern central Panhandle with lighter, more showery conditions to the south. Looks like a dry, partly sunny day in part here for south central Alaska into Bristol Bay. Kodiak Island right on the edge with that low center. Probably you'll see some rain along the east side of the island there, and then drier back towards Shelikof Strait. High pressure really building into the southeast interior. And then some showers, areas of light rain, Brooks Range in the northern valleys here. Isolated showers in the north slope, but the Bering Sea looking really good here with light winds, high pressure, just clouds, patchy areas of fog, and the next system way off to the northwest. Low temperatures for tonight, lower to mid-30s along the Arctic coast, upper 30s for the Brooks Range, 40s and lower 50s here to mid-50s over Bristol Bay in some areas, and 40s, lower 50s. For the Panhandle, highs tomorrow, lower 60s Yukon Valley, 55 to 60, mid-50s mostly in the Tanana Valley. Look for some 60s here along the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, Port Hayden and Pilot Point, with mid-60s, maybe upper 60s in the southern Panhandle. Lows for the following morning, about the same up north there, north of the Brooks Range, and 40s and 50s south of the Brooks Range, mid-50s maybe for the south central Alaska. And for the Panhandle, not too bad, 50 to 55 about covers it, near 50 for the Alaska Peninsula, upper 40s Aleutians, Perbilofts up to St. Lawrence Island and the Seward Peninsula. And looking at the highs for Monday afternoon, lower 60s, Kenai Peninsula up into the Mananuska-Susitna Valley, and 55 to 60 here for Bristol Bay, northward to much of the western interior. Same thing for the upper Yukon Valley areas, and lower 40s for the Arctic coast and North Slope areas. With the Panhandle not looking too bad, lower to mid-60s, warmest down to the south, could see maybe 65, 66. And then the Bering Sea, lower to mid-50s, pretty uniform pattern, typical of this time of year out there, with St. Paul forecast high of 53, same thing for Macoriac, and Gamble looking at 49, upper 50s there for the Noatak Valley into Kotzebue.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, IFR widespread here over the Aleutians, marginal for Adak and Atka. Otherwise, IFR right into the southwest interior here and northward in toward the northern Kuskokwim Valley, eastward across Kodiak, Kenai Peninsula, and to the North Gulf Coast, and then marginal VFR along the, or over the Panhandle here, especially in the south, where you've got some IFR, area of VFR, 40-mile country, eastern Alaska range right up into the Yukon there, and then back to the west, northern Seward Peninsula, marginal becoming IFR up there over the eastern Arctic coast. Tomorrow afternoon, some improvement up here over the North Slope and Brooks Range with marginal VFR on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. It looks like IFR clinging roughly from Aliktok westward to maybe Wainwright, and then better conditions on the west side. IFR Seward Peninsula, this area advancing northeastward throughout the day. So we got IFR along the southern slopes of the eastern central Alaska range. IFR along the Alaska Range, maybe marginal for Cook Inlet, and then IFR for the Gulf of Alaska, becoming VFR over the Panhandle, but marginal along the coast, and IFR again here from the Bering Strait, all of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta over to about Dillingham, maybe King Salmon, all the way back into the Aleutians, and it looks like maybe St. Paul, St. George might be on the southern edge of that, so you could be marginal. And then for Monday morning, back into the IFR, really widespread here with the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, right up into the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula inland, almost the central interior, then northward across the Central Brooks Range, all of the Arctic coast, IFR, Gulf of Alaska, IFR, Northern Panhandle, same thing, marginal to the south, and IFR, Prince William Sound into the Talkeetnas, right up to, looks like almost Windy Pass. And in the afternoon, that improves, VFR breaking out over south central Alaska, Matanuska, Susitna Valley, and looks like even the Talkeetnas, a lot of marginal VFR there, Tanana Valley, and IFR, Arctic coast, part of the North Slope, and a little bit of a reduction in the IFR here, at least backing off the southwest coast for marginal VFR in those areas, and the Aleutians, marginal VFR, Adak and Atka, IFR there front Alaska, and now moving on to passes, Anatuvik. Both Anatuvik and Anagan tomorrow, lower conditions in the morning, trending toward VFR in the afternoon or late morning, around noontime or midday. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR early on, persisting in the morning, then becoming or trending toward marginal VFR in the latter part of the afternoon. That same trend holds for Rainy as well. Windy, marginal VFR, IFR, southern entrance, and for Isabel, occasional IFR, probably pretty frequent IFR, mostly tomorrow. And for Mentasta, starting out VFR, but look for conditions to deteriorate throughout the day. This trend possibly hitting IFR in the latter part of the afternoon. Tanita, IFR all day long, and Portage, same thing, IFR the entire day. And Sunday, Chilkoot and White, starting out pretty good, gradually becoming marginal. And for the freezing levels, really warm air aloft here coming up to Kodiak Island, 14,000 feet, 32 degrees, cruise at 12,000 feet there over the Kenai Peninsula, gradually sloping down to about 8,000, 6,000, and then 4,000 on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and some cooler air out here over the Bering Sea, roughly about 6,000 over the central and western areas. Looking at the icing first, with all that moisture sliding northeastward here, we've got areas of just isolated moderate along the west coast, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Could be some considerable moderate up here above 5,000 feet over the Koyuk, Kobuk, maybe even Selawik valleys, and also down here over south central Alaska. Mostly the mountainous terrain there. Talkeetna is up to the Alaska Range. But this way up there with the warm air aloft, you got to get up to about 12,000 feet or above before you have to worry about any icing. And the jet stream, narrow ridge poking up into the eastern interior here. Really strong southwest winds, 130 knots up and over the top, 120 to 130 coming down the long end just east of the Panhandle. And at 9,000 feet southwest, 30 knots, eastern Aleutians, 60 to 65 along and south of the Alaska Peninsula into Kodiak Island, 35 into southern Alaska, and then southeasterlies 25 to 35. Much lighter winds out over the Aleutians. Same pattern, only light winds for the Panhandle, and 40 to 50 knot winds here over Kodiak Island, 30 to 40 over the southwest interior, and lighter again over the Aleutians. Turbulence, widespread moderate chop here for small aircraft in the greatest shaded area below 5,000 feet there, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, western Alaska Range, and also eastern Prince William Sound.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles and nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected. And the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Area back here a little less on the multi-year heavier ice here back in this area, well off to the northwest. And a little bit farther off the coast, this heavier ice as well. And over toward Kaktovik, or the eastern Beaufort Sea coast there, a little closer in, kind of hard to see today. And the overall trend is for varying wind direction, so the net movement of 10 nautical miles or less, especially for the Chukchi Sea. And for the south coast of the Panhandle, northwest 15 tomorrow, otherwise south to southeast at 10 knots. Pretty light winds in the forecast there for Sunday, 8-foot seas. South 25 for Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage, southeast 15, northwest 20 for Clarence Strait. About the same, no change in conditions. Small craft advisories for northern Lynn Canal for Monday, south 15 for Stevens Passage, northwest 15 Clarence Strait, and pretty general westerly wind at 20 knots with 8 to 10-foot seas here along the coast. And for the Prince William Sound zone, east 25 knots, small craft advisories there, seas up to 6 feet. And southeast 25 or south-southeast 25 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Gales here for the Barren Islands, southwest 30, seas at 12 feet. And southeast 30, Kamishak Bay. Southern Cook Inlet, south 30 knots, 8-foot seas, much lighter north of the Forelands, out of the southeast at 10. And then those pick up 25 knots here north of the Forelands and stay small craft advisories with southwest 25 here for Southern Cook Inlet. West 20 knots on Monday for Kamishak Bay and the Barrens, and then small craft advisories for west-southwest winds at 25 for the North Gulf Coast, light west winds for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island looks like some gale force southwesterlies on the eastern zones here, and Shelikof Strait southwest 30 knots. Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, southwest 30, and also from Cape Sarachev all the way up across Bristol Bay, same thing, southwest winds 30 knots, 7 to 9-foot seas. And for Monday, lighter winds in store for all these areas. South 10 knots, Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, west 15 for Bristol Bay, northeast 15 here from Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, and then on up to Sitkinak, light southwest winds and southwest 20 there on the east side of Kodiak, small craft advisories, and Shelikof Strait. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, it looks like west-southwest 15 to 25 with 7 to 11 foot seas. Central Aleutians, pretty light, west 15, and that pattern extends all the way out to Shimi and Attu. Then for Monday, south 15 knots here for the western Aleutian areas. Not too bad. Again, high pressure dominating the Bering Sea and influencing the Aleutians as well. So easterlies 10 to 15 for the central Aleutians with 4 to 6 foot seas. And then the Fox Islands, kind of a variable wind pattern here, 10 to 15 to maybe 20 knots, with those northeast at 20 knot winds there south of Unalaska Island, and the seas will be the highest there as well at 10 feet. And for the southwest coast, Sunday, small craft advisories here for the southwest coast, southwest at 30 there, blowing right into Kuskokwim Bay with 10-foot seas. West 25 knots for the Pribilofs and 10-foot seas as well. Small craft advisories here for westerlies on the north side of Nunivak Island. Those turn south at 25 for St. Lawrence Island, a little lighter in Norton Sound, and small craft advisories for St. Matthew Island. Then for Monday, much lighter winds coming in store for the Pribilofs at 10, from the south at 10 knots. West 15 south of Nunivak Island, southwest 20 here north of the island. Westerlies 20 to 25 St. Lawrence Island across in Norton Sound. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, pretty light winds tomorrow, northeast at 10, pick up to 15 here midway over to the central coast, and then 20 knots on down to Cape Beaufort for the central and west side. And from Cape Thompson to Wales, easterlies at 20. For Monday, north 15 here for the Chukchi Sea, northeast 15 from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, west side and the central coast, east of 15, east of 20 knots. We'll pick up in the wind there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight, again, this system spreading a lot of rain, widespread area of rain, some of which will be moderate and heavy here in advance of the front and the warm front, and even back down along the Alaska Peninsula. Wind's not that big of a problem with it, not much of a factor, more of a rain producer, with rain Kodiak Island pushing ever so slowly up Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula into western Prince William Sound. Improving conditions on the southeast coast as that trough kicks off to the southeast. And then for tomorrow, rain shifts up to the central interior. Wind advisories for the Alaska Range near Fort Greely. And the outlook for Monday, rain spreads in with this warm front into the Panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal, pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.